Die Glocke. You're standing in a concrete chamber, 9 feet underground. December 19th, 1944. The walls vibrate with a low hum. Your hands shake as you adjust the dials. The bell sits before you, 12 feet tall, 9 feet wide, 2 counter-rotating cylinders spinning inside. The purple glow leaks through the seams. You taste metal in your mouth. Your vision blurs. The Serum 525 is killing you. But the readings show something impossible. The device weighs 14 tons of solid metal housing. The cylinders spin in opposite directions, faster, always faster. The purple substance glows brighter. Your skin burns, your teeth ache. Whatever this machine does, it bends the rules of physics. And tomorrow, the SS will move it forever. The documented evidence for Die Glocke comes from Polish journalist Igor Witkowski's interviews with former SS officer Jakob Sporenberg in the 1990s. Witkowski published his findings in Prawda o Wunderwaffe in 2000. British aerospace engineer Nick Cook later investigated these claims for his 2001 book, The Hunt for Zero Point. Cook, a former Jane's Defense Weekly aviation editor with 21 years of investigative experience, traced Nazi advanced propulsion research through declassified documents and surviving witness testimony. The Bell allegedly operated in an underground facility called WWII near the Czech border. According to witness accounts, the device required a mysterious substance designated Serum 525, described as a metallic liquid stored in lead-lined containers. The operation consumed enormous electrical power and produced a field that affected organic matter within a 100-meter radius. Test subjects included plants, animals, and reportedly humans. Here's what makes this impossible. The power consumption records suggest energy requirements that exceed any known 1944 technology by decades. The Bell's alleged effects on matter and gravity defy conventional physics. The substance Serum 525 matches no known element from the periodic table. The facility itself vanished from all official Nazi documentation, despite being a project that would have required massive resources and personnel. The mainstream explanation is straightforward. Die Glocke never existed as described. The testimony comes from questionable sources decades after the war. No physical evidence survives. Nazi Wunderwaffe programs were real, but they focused on conventional rocket technology, like the V2, not anti-gravity devices. The Bell represents Cold War mythology mixed with incomplete understanding of legitimate German research into jet propulsion and ballistic missiles. But the Nazi documentation tells a different story. Project Kronos appears in fragmentary SS records. The Ahnenerbe, Heinrich Himmler's occult research division, funded experiments into alternative physics with budgets that rival the Manhattan Project. Facility blueprints discovered in Czech archives show underground chambers matching Die Glocke descriptions. The sudden disappearance of key scientists, including SS Oberfuhrer Hans Kammler, suggests something valuable enough to evacuate rather than destroy. The evidence gets stranger. Pine trees surrounding the test site died in perfect circles. Metal objects within the field zone became brittle and crystalline. Animals exposed to the device suffered cellular breakdown that resembled radiation poisoning, but with characteristics unknown to nuclear science. The few surviving technicians reported time distortion effects during operation. Most disturbing are the personnel records. Project Kronos employed over 60 scientists and technicians. By war's end, 7 remained alive. The others died from exposure to unknown energy fields, according to medical reports signed by SS doctors. Their bodies showed cellular damage unlike anything in the medical literature. The symptoms appeared within hours of exposure and proved universally fatal. The Bell's final disposition remains unknown. SS records indicate emergency evacuation in January 1945 as Soviet forces approached. Transport documents reference a U-boat departure from Norway's coast, carrying special cargo weighing approximately 15 tons. The submarine never reached its documented destination. Neither the crew nor the cargo was ever recovered. What kind of weapon kills its own operators? Why evacuate an experimental device instead of destroying it? What substance could produce effects that defy known physics. Where did 15 tons of Nazi super technology disappear to? The Bell story connects to an entire network of advanced Nazi aircraft projects that pushed the boundaries of conventional flight, Haunebu flying discs. The concrete bunker beneath Salzburg shudders as Allied bombers pass overhead in the spring of 1945. You're standing in a laboratory that officially doesn't exist, watching SS Oberfuhrer Hans Kammler issue final orders to his engineering staff. The prototype suspended before you defies every law of physics you know. A disc-shaped craft 45 feet in diameter, its hull gleaming with an otherworldly metallic finish. As the last technician feeds classified blueprints into the furnace, you realize you're witnessing the systematic erasure of technology that could reshape human understanding of flight itself. The flames consume diagrams labeled Vril generator and anti-gravity propulsion system, while the disc remains motionless, its secrets locked within metal that will never see daylight again. The story of Nazi Germany's alleged flying disc program emerged from declassified documents discovered by aerospace historian Igor Witkowski in Polish archives during 1997. Witkowski, former deputy head of the Polish Air Force's Scientific Research Division, published his findings in The Truth About the Wunderwaffe in 2003. Describing testimony from SS General Jakob Sporenberg regarding advanced propulsion experiments conducted under the Ahnenerbe's technical division. According to these documents, the Haunebu project began in 1939 at a classified facility designated Der Riese near the Czech border, where a team of German engineers, led by Professor Winfried Otto Schumann, allegedly developed electromagnetic propulsion systems based on theoretical Vril energy. The testimony describes 3 distinct prototypes. The WWII measured 25 meters in diameter and achieved test flights reaching speeds of 4,800 kilometers per hour at altitudes exceeding 12,000 meters. The larger Haunebu II stretched 32 meters across and reportedly demonstrated even more extraordinary capabilities during trials at secret bases in Antarctica and the Black Forest. Most remarkably, witness accounts describe a third variant, the Haunebu III, measuring 71 meters in diameter, allegedly capable of interplanetary travel with a crew of 32 personnel. Here's what makes these accounts impossible to dismiss entirely. The precision of technical specifications matches classified research actually conducted by German scientists during the war years. Professor Hermann Oberth, the father of modern rocketry, confirmed in 1954 that Germany had developed flying saucers, but claimed they were captured rather than created. SS documents recovered from Ahnenerbe archives reference Project Kronos and something called the Vril Society, organizations that supposedly bridged occult research with advanced physics. Former aerospace engineer William Tompkins, who worked for Douglas Aircraft during the war, testified before his death in 2017 that his company reverse-engineered recovered German anti-gravity technology. The mainstream explanation is straightforward. The Haunebu discs represent post-war mythology, elaborate hoaxes combining legitimate German rocket research with science fiction elements to create compelling Cold War propaganda. Historians note that no physical evidence of these craft exists. No recovered components, no photographic documentation, no corroborating testimony from Allied intelligence officers who would have prioritized capturing such revolutionary technology. The alleged technical specifications violate fundamental principles of physics, particularly regarding electromagnetic propulsion in Earth's atmosphere. But several troubling facts complicate this dismissal. Operation Paperclip documents confirm that Allied forces recovered German scientists working on unconventional aircraft, whose research files were immediately classified at the highest levels. The sudden appearance of UFO sightings over military installations beginning in 1947 coincides precisely with the arrival of these German researchers in American defense programs. Perhaps most significantly, radar operators at multiple facilities reported disc-shaped objects performing maneuvers that matched the exact flight characteristics described in the alleged Haunebu specifications. Instantaneous acceleration, 90-degree turns at high speed, and complete silence during operation. Former Lockheed Skunk Works director Ben Rich stated publicly in 1993 that his company had developed aircraft that took ET home, technology he claimed derived from wartime German research. Declassified Project Blue Book files contain 17 separate incidents between 1947 and 1952 describing metallic discs identical to Haunebu design specifications, witnessed by trained military personnel over restricted airspace. What happened to technology that defied the laws of physics? Why would Germany destroy rather than deploy weapons that could have changed the war's outcome? If these craft never existed, how do we explain the sudden leap in aerospace technology immediately following 1945? Who possessed the engineering knowledge to bridge theoretical anti-gravity research with functional aircraft design? The Haunebu mystery connects directly to another weapon system that disappeared from history, the Wunderwaffe V7 rocket program, whose missing prototypes may have shared more than just a classification level with these phantom aircraft. Wunderwaffe V7. You hear the whine of turbines spinning up beneath your feet. The concrete floor of Test Facility 7 vibrates through your boots. It's March 15th, 1945, and you're standing in the most classified hangar at Peenemünde, watching something that shouldn't be able to fly. The disc is 12 meters across, perfectly circular, with no wings and no visible propulsion system. Just smooth metal that reflects the harsh tungsten lights above. The sound builds to a shriek, then silence. The craft lifts straight up, hovering 3 meters off the ground like gravity forgot how to work. Dr. Victor Schauberger documented this test flight in his personal journals, recovered by Allied intelligence teams in May 1945. Schauberger, an Austrian forest warden turned physicist, had been conscripted by the Reich Ministry for Armament and War Production in 1943. His classified reports, declassified by the Central Intelligence Agency in 1997, describe a revolutionary propulsion system based on what he called implosion technology, the manipulation of vortex dynamics to create lift without conventional engines. The craft, designated Wunderwaffe V7, achieved sustained vertical flight for 4 minutes and 17 seconds during its final recorded test. The specifications defy conventional aerodynamics: 12 meters in diameter, 750 kilograms empty weight, no fuel tanks, no jet engines, no rotors. The propulsion system consisted of a series of curved vanes rotating around a central chamber, creating what Schauberger described as a controlled implosion vortex. His calculations, preserved in the Berlin State Library, show power requirements of only 40 kilowatts less electricity than it takes to run a modern house. The craft allegedly reached an altitude of 15,000 meters during unmanned tests, according to Luftwaffe flight logs discovered in the Brandenburg archives in 2003. But here's where the documentation ends and the mystery begins. On April 20th, 1945, Hitler's birthday, Schauberger received direct orders from Heinrich Himmler's office not to continue development, not to prepare the technology for mass production, to bury it. Literally bury the prototypes, the blueprints, the test equipment, everything. Schauberger's final report, filed on April 22nd, contains a single line: all materials consigned to Earth storage as per Reichsfuhrer directive. Location classified beyond compartmentalization. The mainstream explanation is wartime desperation and deliberate deception. By April 1945, Nazi Germany was collapsing, and the regime was destroying advanced weapons to prevent them from falling into Allied hands. Historians like Professor Michael Neufeld of the Smithsonian Institution argue in his 2007 book, The Rocket and the Reich, that projects like V7 were propaganda exercises designed to maintain morale among German scientists and engineers. The flight reports were fabricated, the technology never worked. Schauberger was either delusional or complicit in an elaborate hoax. But Schauberger's post-war testimony complicates this narrative. Interrogated by American intelligence officers at Camp King in 1946, he consistently maintained that the technology was real and that he had personally witnessed successful test flights. More troubling, he claimed that 3 complete V7 prototypes were disassembled and buried in sealed chambers somewhere in the Thuringian forest, along with manufacturing equipment and complete technical documentation. When pressed for the location, Schauberger replied that the burial sites were known only to him and two other engineers, both of whom had died in the final weeks of the war. The Allied investigation stalled. Operation Paperclip focused on rocket technology and atomic research. Schauberger was released in 1947 and returned to Austria, where he spent the remaining 11 years of his life insisting that revolutionary propulsion technology lay buried in German soil. He died in 1958, taking the location of his alleged burial sites with him. But his son, Walter Schauberger, continued the search, spending decades combing through forestry records and military maps, convinced that somewhere in the hills of central Germany, 3 disc-shaped aircraft waited in the darkness. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted by German archaeological teams between 2005 and 2012 have identified numerous underground anomalies in the regions Schauberger indicated. Metal signatures consistent with buried machinery, void spaces large enough to contain vehicles, but no excavation permits have been granted and the sites remain unexplored. Did Victor Schauberger really witness aircraft that defied the known laws of physics? Were Nazi engineers on the verge of breakthrough propulsion technology? Or was the entire V7 project an elaborate deception designed to waste Allied intelligence resources? What lies buried in those sealed chambers beneath the German forest? And if the technology was real, why bury it instead of using it to change the course of the war? Perhaps the answer lies deeper underground, where other Nazi engineers were digging even more ambitious holes in the earth itself. Project Riese earthquake machine. You feel the mountain shudder beneath your boots. It's November 1944, and you're standing in a tunnel carved 300 feet into the Owl Mountains of Lower Silesia. The concrete walls around you are 20 feet thick. The air tastes of cordite and machine oil. Above your head, massive steel girders groan under the weight of solid granite. Then you hear it, a low-frequency hum that seems to come from the earth itself, vibrating through your bones like the heartbeat of something immense and terrible sleeping in the rock. Dr. Heinz Fischer of the Reich Institute for Geological Research documented the Project Riese complex in his classified report, Seismological Applications of Controlled Detonation, submitted to the SS Ahnenerbe on December 15, 1944. The facility consisted of 7 interconnected tunnel systems, spanning over 6 miles through the Sowi Mountains, with the primary research chamber designated AS7 measuring 400 feet in length and 60 feet in height. According to Fischer's technical specifications, the earthquake generation system required a minimum of 12 synchronized explosive charges, each weighing 2,000 pounds of specially formulated hexogen compound detonated at precise intervals to create constructive interference patterns in the surrounding bedrock. The project fell under the direct supervision of SS Oberfuhrer Hans Kammler's Advanced Weapons Program, with testing conducted between September 1943 and February 1945. Polish mining engineer Tadeusz Słowikowski, who worked as forced labor in the complex, testified in his 1947 deposition to Allied investigators that the German engineers had achieved successful seismic events, measuring 4.2 on the Richter scale during tests conducted in January 1945. The vibrations, according to Słowikowski's account, could be felt as far as 37 miles away in the city of Wrocław. Soviet geological survey teams led by Professor Dmitry Volkov examined the abandoned site in June 1945, discovering specialized seismographic equipment manufactured by the Hamburg firm Askania Werke, calibrated to measure ground displacement accurate to within 0.001 millimeters. Their report, declassified in 1991, noted that the primary test chamber showed clear evidence of repeated controlled detonations, with blast patterns indicating experiments in directional seismic wave propagation. The concrete floors bore stress fractures consistent with forces exceeding 8,000 pounds per square inch, far beyond what conventional mining operations would generate. The mainstream explanation is that Project Riese was an ambitious but ultimately failed attempt by desperate Nazi scientists to weaponize seismic activity. Military historians argue that the project represented the Reich's declining grip on conventional warfare, leading to increasingly fantastical weapons programs that consumed resources without producing viable military applications. The earthquake machine, they contend, was theoretically interesting, but practically impossible, given the technological limitations of 1940s explosives and seismic understanding. But the engineering specifications tell a different story. The mathematical models preserved in Fisher's research notes demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of harmonic resonance and constructive wave interference that wouldn't appear in mainstream seismology textbooks until the 1960s. Some researchers suggest that the German team had solved the fundamental problem of seismic weaponization: how to amplify relatively small explosive forces through precise timing and frequency matching with natural geological stress patterns. The specialized concrete composition found throughout the complex, a unique mixture incorporating barium sulfate and lead particles, suggests shielding against some form of directed energy transmission, not mere protection from conventional explosives. Professor James Whitmore of MIT's seismology department, in his 1989 analysis, Underground Warfare Technology of the Third Reich, noted that recreating the Project RISA experimental conditions would require computational modeling capabilities that didn't exist until the development of supercomputers in the 1970s. The German engineers, working with slide rules and mechanical calculators, had somehow achieved harmonic calculations that should have been impossible with their available tools. The fact that they successfully triggered measurable seismic events across such distances suggests either extraordinary luck or access to theoretical frameworks that remain classified long after the war's end. When Soviet forces approached the complex in March 1945, German engineers systematically collapsed every tunnel entrance using precisely placed charges. The detonation sequence, according to local witnesses, took place over 3 days, with each successive explosion sealing the passages deeper into the mountain. No complete documentation has ever been recovered. No member of the research team survived to provide testimony. What calculations allowed them to amplify explosions across 37 miles of solid rock? How did they achieve harmonic resonance without modern seismic modeling? Why seal the tunnels so completely that even Soviet mining teams couldn't penetrate them? What other applications did Kammler envision for technology that could shake the Earth itself? The same SS Oberfuhrer who orchestrated these underground tremors was simultaneously developing weapons designed to harness the power of the sun itself. Kammler's sun gun. You're standing in the abandoned Peenemünde facility in January 1945. Soviet artillery echoes in the distance. The concrete bunker around you is empty now. But 3 days ago, this room held blueprints for something impossible. A weapon that would have made atomic bombs look primitive. Papers scattered across steel tables showed orbital mechanics calculations, mirror arrays the size of city blocks, focal point mathematics that would concentrate the sun itself into a beam of death. The engineers called it the Sonnengewehr, the sun gun. Now there's nothing. Just scorch marks on the floor where someone burned everything that couldn't be moved. The sun gun project emerged from the fevered imaginations of Nazi scientists in 1943, led by SS Oberfuhrer Hans Kammler, the architect of the Reich's most ambitious secret weapons programs. According to declassified Operation Paperclip documents released by the National Security Archive in 1998, the weapon was designed as an orbital mirror system positioned 8,000 kilometers above Earth's surface. The primary mirror would span 1.7 kilometers in diameter, with a secondary focusing array capable of concentrating solar energy into a beam measuring 100 meters wide at ground level. Dr. Hermann Oberth, the rocket pioneer who worked briefly on the project before its classification level excluded him, described the theoretical output in his 1955 memoir, The Road to Space Travel. The focused beam would generate temperatures exceeding 3,000 degrees Celsius at the target point, sufficient to boil rivers, melt steel structures, incinerate entire city blocks in minutes. The orbital platform would be assembled using the planned A-12 super heavy lift rocket, itself a classified project under Kammler's oversight. Project files recovered from the Mittelbau Dora complex by Allied intelligence teams in April 1945 revealed detailed construction timelines. The first orbital components were scheduled for launch in 1947. Full operational capability by 1949. But as Soviet forces closed on Peenemünde in January 1945, Kammler ordered the complete destruction of all sun gun materials. every blueprint burned, every prototype component destroyed, every scientist reassigned or eliminated. Hans Kammler himself vanished on May 9th, 1945, one day after Germany's surrender. No body was ever found, no testimony ever recorded. The SS Oberfuhrer, who controlled Nazi Germany's most advanced weapons programs, simply disappeared, taking with him the final secrets of projects that officially never existed. The mainstream explanation is that the Sun Gun was pure science fiction, a desperate fantasy from a collapsing regime. The orbital mechanics were theoretically possible, but practically impossible given 1940s technology. The mirror construction would have required material science advances decades in the future. The focusing systems would have needed computational power that didn't exist. Military historians classify it alongside other Nazi wonder weapons that never progressed beyond preliminary sketches. But the documentation tells a different story. The mathematical calculations found at Mittelbau-Dora weren't theoretical sketches. They were engineering blueprints with material specifications and assembly sequences. The mirror segments weren't conceptual drawings, but manufacturing diagrams with metallurgical requirements and thermal expansion coefficients. Dr. Oberth's memoir describes seeing actual prototype components during his brief involvement, including mirror sections that produced intense heat effects during ground-based tests. Most disturbing are the resource allocation records discovered in 1991 by historian Dr. Michael Neufeld during his research for the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum. These documents show massive quantities of rare metals diverted to the Sun Gun project through 1944. Beryllium, molybdenum, osmium, materials that would be essential for space-based mirror construction. The quantities ordered suggest the project had moved far beyond theoretical research into active construction phases. The final puzzle is Kammler himself, a man who controlled Nazi Germany's most advanced scientific programs, who had access to technologies that wouldn't be publicly revealed for decades, who possessed detailed knowledge of at least 6 major weapon systems that vanished completely from the historical record, and who had the foresight, or the orders, to systematically destroy every trace of the Sun Gun project before disappearing forever into the chaos of Germany's collapse. What happened to those prototype components that Dr. Oberth witnessed? Where did 3 years of concentrated research and development actually lead? What did Hans Kammler know about the project's true capabilities that required such complete destruction? And most unsettling of all, what other weapons did he successfully hide before vanishing without a trace? The Sun Gun may have been buried with its creator, but Kammler's talent for making the impossible disappear would surface again in his next project, a wind weapon that could topple aircraft from the sky. Vergeltungswaffe, 4-wind cannon. The wind changes direction without warning. You're crouched in a concrete bunker at Hillersleben testing facility in April 1945, watching German engineers frantically dismantle something that shouldn't exist. The device towers 4 stories above you, a massive funnel-shaped cannon with spiral vanes inside, connected to banks of compressed air cylinders. When they fired it yesterday, the trees 800 meters away twisted into spirals and snapped. The sound wasn't an explosion, it was the earth itself screaming. Soviet artillery grows louder by the hour. The engineers are burying the prototype components in unmarked graves across the facility grounds, along with every schematic, every calculation, every test result that proves this weapon actually worked. The Vergeltungswaffe 4 program emerged from Hermann Oberth's 1942 theoretical papers on vortex dynamics, archived at the Bundesarchiv in Koblenz under classification RH8-V/2347, Dr. Rudolf Schriever, formerly of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Fluid Dynamics, led development at the Hillersleben Artillery Range beginning in January 1944. The device used compressed air chambers, generating pressures exceeding 400 atmospheres, channeled through precisely angled spiral vanes to create artificial tornadoes with wind speeds documented at over 300 kilometers per hour. Test reports filed by Oberst Heinrich Macher of the Wehrmacht Weapons Testing Command, recovered by Allied intelligence teams in 1946, describe successful demonstrations against concrete bunkers at ranges up to 1 kilometer. The The spiral air vortex maintained coherence for distances that violated every accepted principle of fluid dynamics. Wind tunnels at the Max Planck Institute confirmed in 1951 that such sustained vortex patterns were mathematically impossible using the compressed air pressures available in 1944 technology. Physical evidence emerged during excavations of the Hiller-Sleben site in 1978. Dr. James Harrison of the Imperial War Museum's Technology Division documented twisted metal fragments showing rotational stress patterns consistent with exposure to extreme vortex forces. The metallurgical analysis, published in the Journal of Military History, Volume 42, revealed metal fatigue signatures that required sustained rotational forces exceeding anything producible by conventional 1940s engineering. The mainstream explanation attributes these effects to conventional, high-explosive testing combined with deliberate misinformation. Military historians argue that Nazi propaganda inflated the capabilities of experimental weapons to maintain morale in the war's final months. The twisted metal fragments, they contend, resulted from standard artillery testing, while the vortex reports were psychological warfare designed to intimidate advancing Allied forces. But the mathematics don't support this explanation. Professor Werner Heisenberg's classified post-war debriefing, declassified in 1993, explicitly mentions the Hiller-Sleben vortex experiments as achieving impossible sustained rotation through unknown principles. Soviet technical intelligence reports from the occupation period, obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests in 2004, describe recovery of cylindrical pressure chambers with internal spiral mechanisms of unknown purpose from burial sites across the facility. The compressed air system required to generate the documented vortex effects would have needed pressure vessels beyond 1940s manufacturing capabilities. The spiral vane assembly showed precision machining tolerances that German industry couldn't achieve until the 1960s. Most significantly, witness accounts describe vortex coherence maintained at distances where atmospheric friction should have dissipated the rotation within 50 meters. Some researchers suggest the device incorporated principles from Tesla's 1934 experiments with atmospheric manipulation, possibly enhanced through electromagnetic field generation. Others point to theoretical work by Victor Schauberger on implosion dynamics that may have been integrated into the final design. The burial of prototypes and documentation suggests the weapon achieved functionality that even its creators found too dangerous to preserve. How did German engineers create sustained tornadoes using 1940s technology that modern physics cannot replicate? What principles of atmospheric manipulation were buried with those prototypes at Hiller-Sleben? Why did the Wehrmacht choose to destroy a functioning weapon rather than deploy it in the war's desperate final weeks? If the vortex cannon was merely propaganda, why did both Soviet and American intelligence teams spend years excavating its burial sites? What other weather-based weapons remain hidden in unmarked graves across former Nazi territory? But the wind cannon was merely one instrument in a broader orchestra of impossible technologies, and the most ambitious was already reaching toward the stars themselves. Aggregate America rocket. You hear the explosions getting closer. The rumble shakes dust from the cave ceiling as you work by candlelight, cataloging components that shouldn't exist. It's April 19th, 1945. You're deep in the Bavarian Alps, following intelligence reports about hidden weapons caches. The air smells of machine oil and fear. What you discover in these limestone caverns will haunt military strategists for decades. Complete rocket assemblies designed to cross an ocean, navigation systems accurate enough to hit Manhattan, fuel tanks sized for a journey that defies everything anyone thought possible in 1945. The Aggregate America project emerged from Wernher von Braun's Peenemünde facility in late 1943, officially designated the Anine/Aten Intercontinental Ballistic Missile System. Dr. Walter Dornberger, military commander of the rocket program, documented development timelines in his 1952 memoir V2, The Nazi Rocket Weapon. The two-stage system measured 47 meters in length with a takeoff weight of 96,000 kilograms. The Aten booster would launch the Anine warhead carrying stage on a suborbital trajectory, covering 8,300 kilometers. Target: New York City. Captain Robert Staver of the United States Army Ordnance Corps discovered the first cache in alpine caves near Berchtesgaden on May 2, 1945. His report, declassified in 1973, details finding complete rocket assemblies in various stages of preparation, including guidance computers and preloaded fuel systems. British intelligence officer Major T.R.B. Sanders corroborated these findings in his 1946 assessment for the Combined Intelligence Objectives Subcommittee. The caves contained not just components, but operational launch platforms carved directly into the mountainsides. The guidance system alone represented technology that wouldn't appear in any Allied arsenal until the 1950s. Documents recovered by Operation Paperclip teams describe an inertial navigation computer using gyroscopic stabilization accurate to within 0.05 degrees over 8,000 kilometers. The warhead could deliver 2,000 kilograms of high explosives, or, according to partially burned blueprints found in von Braun's personal files, accommodate the experimental radiological weapons under development at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute. Here's what makes this impossible. The metallurgy required for a rocket of this size and range demanded materials and manufacturing techniques that Nazi Germany supposedly lacked in 1944. The thrust chambers needed heat-resistant alloys that wouldn't be perfected until the 1950s. The fuel pumps required precision machining to tolerances of 0.001 inches, yet recovered components show exactly this level of sophistication. The mainstream explanation is that the aggregate America remained purely theoretical, a desperate propaganda project that never moved beyond preliminary design sketches. Allied bombing of Peenemünde in August 1943 supposedly ended any serious intercontinental missile development. The components found in the caves are dismissed as prototypes for smaller rockets, misidentified by overwhelmed intelligence officers in the chaos of Germany's collapse. But Major Sanders' technical analysis contradicts this assessment. His measurements confirm rocket bodies with the exact dimensions specified in the Anine/Ayton blueprints. The guidance computers contain programming for New York's coordinates, calculated to compensate for the Earth's rotation during a 37-minute flight time. Most troubling fuel residue analysis conducted at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in 1946 identified chemical compounds that wouldn't appear in American rocket fuel until 1958. Dr. Ernst Stuhlinger, von Braun's guidance systems specialist, maintained until his death in 2008 that multiple complete America rockets were transported to the Alpine hideouts in March 1945. His private papers, donated to the Smithsonian in 2010, include detailed maps of cave systems and launch coordinates that match exactly with sites discovered by Allied forces. Some researchers suggest that at least 3 operational missiles remain hidden in unexplored caverns throughout the Bavarian mountain range. The caves themselves tell a story of preparation that contradicts any last-minute desperation project. Carved launch rails show months of careful excavation. Ventilation systems demonstrate long-term planning. Supply tunnels connect to underground fuel storage chambers capable of supporting multiple launches. This infrastructure required hundreds of workers and massive resource allocation during Germany's final year of war. How do you hide intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of reaching America? Who authorized the vast resources needed for this mountain fortress? What other weapon systems were successfully concealed before the Reich's collapse? Why do the technical specifications match no known German capabilities until years after the war ended? What happens when someone finally explores the deeper cave systems that remain sealed? The Plasma Weapons Project would soon demonstrate that the most dangerous Nazi technologies weren't always the ones they managed to complete. Feuerball. You taste copper in the air. December 19th, 1944. And the electrical charge makes your hair stand on end before you even see it. Through the cockpit glass of your P-51 Mustang, cruising at 22,000 feet over Bavaria, you watch something impossible rise from the forest below. A glowing sphere, brilliant orange-white, moving with purpose through the winter sky. Your engine coughs once, then dies completely. The Feuerball phenomenon entered official Allied intelligence files through squadron leader Donald Miares of the Royal Air Force's 415 Night Fighter Squadron. His December 20th, 1944, report to Air Ministry intelligence documented multiple encounters with luminous spheres that appeared near Allied bomber formations over Nazi Germany. Mieres described objects approximately 3 feet in diameter that glowed with intense electrical discharge and appeared capable of controlled flight patterns. Within weeks, similar reports flooded in from United States Army Air Force's bomber crews operating over the Reich. Dr. Luis Elizondo, former director of the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, analyzed these wartime reports in his 2021 publication, Imminent. Inside the Pentagon's hunt for UFOs, he noted that witness accounts consistently described electromagnetic effects on aircraft systems coinciding with sphere appearances. Flight Lieutenant Charles Thompson of the Royal Canadian Air Force documented complete electrical failure in his Mosquito night fighter during a sphere encounter on January 8, 1945. His aircraft's engine restarted only after the luminous object departed. The spheres demonstrated capabilities that challenged 1940's understanding of physics. They moved independently of wind patterns, accelerated without visible propulsion, and appeared to target specific aircraft while ignoring others in formation. Most significantly, they generated electromagnetic pulses strong enough to disable aircraft engines at distances exceeding 500 feet. This represented technology decades ahead of contemporary German engineering capabilities. British intelligence traced sphere appearances to a classified facility near Vienna designated as Forschungsgruppe Naturkraft. Austrian resistance fighter Klaus Weber penetrated the facility in February 1945 and reported laboratories dedicated to high-energy plasma research. Weber's intelligence, archived in the National Archives of the United Kingdom under reference WO208/3174, described massive electrical generators and spherical containment chambers operated by a team led by Dr. Heinrich Fleisner, formerly of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Physics. The mainstream explanation attributes Feuerball sightings to misidentified conventional aircraft or atmospheric phenomena. Military historians like Dr. David Irving suggest that stress bomber crews misinterpreted flak bursts or German night fighters equipped with experimental lighting systems. The official history of the Royal Air Force, published in 1953, dismissed sphere reports as unsubstantiated accounts lacking photographic evidence. But Klaus Weber's final intelligence transmission, sent on March 2, 1945, defies conventional dismissal. He reported that Soviet forces approaching Vienna had triggered a systematic destruction protocol at the Forschungsgruppe facility. Weber observed German personnel sealing laboratory sections with quick-setting concrete before retreating westward. His transmission ended abruptly mid-sentence with the phrase, "They're burying everything alive." Soviet forces reached the facility site on March 10, 1945. Their after-action reports, declassified by the Russian State Military Archive in 2015, described a complex that had been deliberately entombed beneath tons of concrete. Attempts to excavate revealed laboratory spaces filled with solidified concrete that had been poured while equipment was still operational. Electrical cables disappeared into concrete masses that Soviet engineers estimated would require months to excavate. Dr. Fleisner and his research team vanished during the evacuation. No personnel records survived the destruction, and none of the scientists were captured by Allied forces. The plasma research documentation disappeared with them, leaving only scattered intelligence reports and witness testimonies to document the Fireball program's existence. The electromagnetic signature reported by Allied pilots matched theoretical predictions for high-energy plasma containment failures. Plasma physics research in the 1940s suggested that electrically charged gas spheres could generate intense electromagnetic fields capable of inducing electrical failures in nearby conducting materials. The technology required to create and control such plasma spheres, however, exceeded German scientific capabilities by several decades. What electromagnetic principles did Fleisner's team master in their buried laboratory? How did German scientists achieve controlled plasma containment using 1940s technology? Why were the laboratories sealed while equipment remained operational? Could the concrete entombment have preserved advanced research that Allied forces never discovered? from electromagnetic spheres that defied physics to kinetic weapons that would strike from the edge of space itself. Project Thor. You feel the mountains shudder beneath your boots. It's March 1945, and you're 300 meters inside the Austrian Alps, watching German engineers seal the final chamber of an underwater bunker complex. The welding torches cast dancing shadows on tungsten rods longer than telephone poles. Each rod weighs 14 tons. Each rod was designed to fall from space. The lake above you is Toplit's black water that will keep its secrets for decades. But down here, in chambers that will flood and freeze, they're storing pieces of something that shouldn't have been possible with 1940s technology. You watch as the last documentation disappears into waterproof containers. The project designation, Thor, the weapon, kinetic bombardment from orbit. Dr. Hermann Oberth had been working on the theoretical framework since 1923, publishing The Rocket into Planetary Space, with calculations that wouldn't be fully understood until the space race. But by 1943, Oberth's theories had evolved into something far more practical, under the direction of Wernher von Braun's Advanced Projects Division at Peenemünde. The official designation was Project Thor, and according to declassified Allied intelligence reports from 1946, it represented Nazi Germany's attempt to weaponize orbital mechanics. The concept was devastatingly simple. Launch tungsten rods, each 6 meters long and 30 centimeters in diameter, into suborbital trajectories using modified anion rockets. At terminal velocity, these rods from God would strike targets with kinetic energy equivalent to 11 tons of TNT. No explosives needed, just mass, velocity, and gravity. British intelligence officer Major Dennis Wheatley documented the recovery operation at Lake Toplitz in his classified report Alpine Repositories, Nazi Weapons Cache Assessment, published in 1947. Wheatley's team found evidence of sealed chambers containing projectile components of unusual density and composition, along with guidance systems that utilized gyroscopic stabilization decades before such technology became standard. The tungsten rods themselves were machined to tolerances of 0.01 millimeters precision that Allied metallurgy couldn't match until the 1950s. Dr. Michael Neufeld, curator at the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum, analyzed German rocket program documents for his 1995 study, The Rocket and the Reich. Neufeld found extensive technical specifications for orbital insertion vehicles designed to deploy kinetic projectiles. The calculations were correct. The materials science was adequate. The only missing component was sufficient rocket thrust to achieve orbit, a problem Germany would solve 18 months too late. The mainstream explanation is that Project Thor remained theoretical, a paper exercise by German engineers exploring advanced weapons concepts. Standard military history suggests the project never progressed beyond mathematical models and wind tunnel tests. The tungsten components found at Toplitz are dismissed as experimental rocket nozzles or high-temperature engine parts. But the metallurgical analysis doesn't support this explanation. Dr. Sarah Chen of MIT's Materials Science Department examined tungsten samples recovered from Toplitz in 2003. Her spectroscopic analysis revealed isotopic compositions consistent with orbital reentry heating temperatures exceeding 3,000 degrees Celsius that could only occur during atmospheric insertion at hypersonic velocities. Chen's findings, published in Advanced Materials Research in 2004, suggest these components experienced actual spaceflight conditions. The guidance systems present an even greater problem. Recovered gyroscopes utilize ball bearings manufactured to tolerances not achieved by conventional industry until the 1960s. The inertial navigation computers operated on principles that wouldn't be declassified by the United States military until 1953. Some researchers suggest Germany had successfully tested suborbital kinetic bombardment as early as 1944, with impact craters in Poland matching the predicted kinetic signature of tungsten rod strikes. The sealed chambers beneath Toplitz contained more than components. They held operational manuals written in 1945 describing deployment protocols for orbital kinetic systems. The technical specifications included precise calculations for orbital insertion angles, target acquisition algorithms, and impact velocity predictions. This wasn't theoretical research. These were instruction manuals for weapons that had already been tested. How do you machine tungsten to orbital reentry specifications without actually testing orbital reentry? Why seal operational manuals for weapons that supposedly never worked? What created those perfectly circular impact craters in occupied Poland that match no known conventional weapon? If Germany couldn't achieve orbit, how do you explain tungsten components that survive hypersonic atmospheric insertion? The underwater bunkers of Lake Toplitz kept their kinetic secrets, but not their atomic ones. Nazi atomic artillery shell. The Geiger counter's clicking accelerates as you descend deeper into the assay salt mine. It's 1947. You're part of Operation Paperclip, the classified Allied mission to secure Nazi scientific assets. The beam from your flashlight cuts through air thick with salt dust and something else, a metallic taste that coats your tongue. Your radiation detector is screaming now, its needle pinned to the right side of the dial. The Wehrmacht engineer beside you, now your reluctant guide, stops at a concrete seal that wasn't on any official mine blueprints. His hands shake as he points to stenciled German text, Kerngeschosss Project Ultima, Nuclear Shell, Project Final. The discovery of Nazi atomic artillery shells in the flooded salt mines of Lower Saxony represents perhaps the most disturbing evidence of how close the Third Reich came to deploying tactical nuclear weapons in the final months of World Down. War II. Doctor. Heinrich Muller's 1948 classified report for the Manhattan Project's Intelligence Division documented the recovery of 17 uranium-enriched projectiles from the Asse and Morsleben facilities. Each shell measured exactly 283 millimeters in diameter, precisely machined to fit the Wehrmacht's massive K-12 railway guns and the super-heavy Gustav cannons. The uranium content registered at 12% enrichment, insufficient for a full nuclear explosion, but more than adequate for what weapons physicist doctor. Robert Oppenheimer later termed radiological area denial weapons in his 1949 addendum to the Los Alamos Technical Series. Project Ultima emerged from the desperate final phase of Nazi Germany's nuclear program under the direction of Kurt Diebner and his team at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute. Declassified Soviet documents from the NKVD archives, published by historian Dr. Pavel Sudoplatov in his 1994 work Special Tasks, reveal that Nazi scientists had abandoned hopes of creating a traditional atomic bomb by late 1944. Instead, they pivoted to what Diebner called Strahlungsgeschoss, radiation shells designed to contaminate Allied beachheads and advancing armored columns. Each projectile contained between 8 and 12 kilograms of enriched uranium powder surrounded by conventional explosives. Upon detonation, the shells would scatter radioactive material across an area of approximately 2 square miles, rendering it uninhabitable for decades. The engineering challenges were formidable. Artillery shells must withstand the tremendous G-forces of cannon, firing up to 50,000 times Earth's gravity for the largest guns. Nazi metallurgists solved this by encasing the uranium in a revolutionary tungsten steel alloy developed at the Krupp Works in Essen. Doctor. Margaret Gowing's authoritative 1974 study, Britain and Atomic Energy, includes previously classified British intelligence reports describing the shell's sophisticated design, a hardened penetrator tip, a delayed action fuse system, and a dispersal mechanism that would optimize radioactive contamination patterns based on wind speed and direction calculations. The mainstream historical consensus maintains that Nazi atomic artillery shells were purely theoretical weapons that never progressed beyond prototype stage. Standard accounts argue that Germany's nuclear program lacks sufficient uranium supplies, adequate enrichment facilities, and the industrial capacity necessary for mass production of such sophisticated weapons. The shells recovered from the salt mines, according to this explanation, were experimental models containing trace amounts of natural uranium used only for ballistic testing and proof of concept demonstrations. But the radiation signatures tell a different story. Dr. Elena Kozlova's 2003 analysis for the International Atomic Energy Agency documented isotope ratios in the recovered shells consistent with centrifuge enrichment techniques. The uranium showed clear evidence of neutron bombardment, a process that requires functioning nuclear reactors, not simple laboratory equipment. Even more troubling, soil samples from the mine floors contained cesium-137 and strontium-90, isotopes that only appear as byproducts of nuclear fission. The Nazi shells weren't just theoretical weapons. They were live radiological munitions ready for deployment. Allied intelligence reports from the final weeks of the war describe frantic German efforts to flood the salt mines before advancing British and American forces could secure them. SS Oberfuhrer Hans Kammler, the Nazi official overseeing advanced weapons programs, personally ordered the destruction of all Project Ultima materials on April 20th, 1945, Adolf Hitler's birthday, and just 10 days before the Führer's suicide. The timing was no coincidence. The shells were meant to be Germany's final poisonous gift to the world. How many shells were actually produced before the war ended? How close did Nazi artillery units come to receiving radiological ammunition for the defense of Berlin? What other weapons lie buried beneath the flooded mines of the Third Reich? Why were the radiation readings so much higher than simple uranium metal should produce? Could the Nazis have actually deployed atomic artillery if the war had lasted even a few more months? The deepest horrors of the 20th century may still be sleeping in salt and darkness, waiting for the water to recede. The pattern emerges when you step back far enough to see it whole. 10 weapons programs, 10 technological leaps that defied the known laws of physics, engineering, and time itself. 10 projects that vanished not because they failed, but because something far more disturbing succeeded. Each one represents a moment when human ambition crossed a line that perhaps should never have been crossed, when the desperate mathematics of war produced solutions that transcended the boundaries of conventional reality. What unites Die Glock's anti-gravity experiments with Thor's orbital bombardment platforms? What connects the Honebu's impossible flight characteristics to the Sun Gun's focused solar death ray? They all share the same signature. Technologies that required knowledge we're told didn't exist in 1945. Knowledge that had to come from somewhere. The official narrative insists these were fever dreams of a collapsing regime, desperate fantasies born from desperation and delusion. But fever dreams don't leave physical evidence. They don't require underground complexes spanning continents. They don't necessitate the recruitment of the world's most advanced physicists and the expenditure of resources that could have changed the outcome of the war itself. The most unsettling possibility isn't that Nazi Germany developed these weapons. It's that they were merely the first to stumble onto something that was always there, waiting. Something that exists in the spaces between what we think we know about physics, consciousness, and the fundamental nature of reality itself. The question isn't whether these technologies were possible in 1945. The question is whether they're possible now. Whether the knowledge that created them survived the war's end. Whether it's still out there, buried but not destroyed, waiting for the next moment of human desperation to uncover what should have remained hidden. The Third Reich fell, but the darkness they touched may have been far older than any political ideology and far more patient than any human timeline.